Hello folks, this is the next phase of repairing some of the sleeving on the F5. This is obviously the meters. My original intention, until I took a better look at them, was to try to avoid having to re-sleeve these also, but as you can see, this setup is in pretty poor shape. Someone previously again has wrapped everything with black electrical tape. The sleeving, though it's fairly intact, that is, it looks like most of it's there. It's all cracked and dry and brittle, just like the other sleeves. So I'm going to go ahead and re-sleeve this as well. Now this is a little bit more complicated in the sense that these end connectors right here are going to have to be removed in order to slide the sleeve over the individual harnesses. As you can see, this one just has 2 connectors, and this one has 5 or 6. And these can be removed and put back. In the ends here, there's a little, these are probably brass, there's a little tip that twists up like this. I'm exaggerating, like this actually, and it engages and prevents this wire from being pulled back. And what I have to go in there and do is go in there with a little tool, depress that tab, and then I can pull the wire out. So it's a little fiddly, but it can be done. The caution is you have to make sure you get the right wire back in the right location. And what I do is I photograph it, the individual part connector, from several different angles, both sides, top and bottom. So I have a record via photos of how each wire goes into, or where each wire goes into the connector. And occasionally I even make a written diagram of it as well, just as a backup. That's really the key component. Other than that, it's just a little fiddly to remove each one of these and then re-sleeve it. So my next step will be to remove the end connectors, and I will at least demonstrate. I'm not going to show removing them all, because once you do one, it's just a repetition, but I will demonstrate how to remove them, and then we'll go ahead and re-sleeve this. This is an up-close look at the terminal. This is obviously the 2 connector unit, the red and black and yellow wires. You can see here the 2 round looped barrel shaped components to this. That's what engages in the flat blade connector on the mating part. This would be the female, and then a flat blade opposite would slide into that. We're going to call these loops the bottom. And if you look very carefully in here, you can see a brass ear or tab that sticks up, something like that. And what we have to do is go in there with a fine tool. In this case, I just have I think this is a paper clip that I sharpened and bent years ago. Something fine that will go in there. What I'm going to do is push that tab down and then pull the wire out from the opposite side. Like, let's see if we can do this here. Gotta get just right. Like that. And there you go. Now you can see the little ear. It's pushed down a little bit, so what I'll do when I put it back together is I'll push that tab up just a bit. You don't want to overwork it, you don't want to break it off, but I'll push it back up just a little bit so that when I push it back in like this, it'll latch automatically. And that's really all there is to it. It's a little finicky, but as you can see, it can be done with a little finesse. It quite often helps to push forward on the wire towards the end. See if I can get this in here. I'm doing this through I'm watching this through the Oh, there we go. got apart. I dropped my tool, but there's the other one. So I got them both out. Now I got to go find my tool that I dropped on the floor. And I'll just repeat the process on the other connector, again paying particular attention to how they're oriented. But the process is exactly the same. Couldn't find my little tool, so I just went and made another one, took another paper clip, and I don't know how well that shows, and just ground a flat on it back a ways. And you can see I've already removed a couple from the 6 connector block. But again, what I'm going to do, I put the bottom where the loops are facing down, take my little tool and push it in like that, and just extract the wires by depressing that prong, that tab. I can keep this in frame. I'm doing this through the, as I said, through the camera view port, and it's awkward at best to do it that way. See? And I'll just finish the last 2 I've got left. Okay, we got all the tape off. Here's all the black electrical tape. I stripped off the 2 harnesses, and they are supposed to be separate. The previous owner who wrapped them up, they bound them together like this and wrapped them. That is not factory correct. They are 2 separate looms for each meter. One thing I did want to share is that you'll notice here, these are heat sealed into place. I don't know if you can get a look at that or not, but there's a depression there where they applied heat to melt the loom, the sleeve together, to prevent this plastic sleeve from sliding up and down. And both harnesses have that feature. This happens to be the tachometer, and you can see, I think there, right where my thumb is, that it was heat sealed at the factory. Now I can't duplicate that very well. I've tried several times over the years to make little irons that I could heat and then press into that and try to duplicate that appearance and function, and it's really never worked out very well for me, so I pretty much have given up on that. And generally it's not an issue anyway, even on a restoration, because the way these harnesses are buried up underneath, you never see it. So I'm not going to attempt to duplicate that. I'm going to end up cutting this off and around the wires here with probably a side cutters, and then I'll re-sleeve it and use an adhesive of some kind on the inside to attach the sleeve to the wiring to emulate the function but not the look. Well, here we are, we're finished. I got the second loom completed. That would be this one. The process was virtually identical to the other one. I removed the connectors from the junction block. This is an 8mm sleeving, which I have in stock. I keep that around, and it slipped on very easily. I didn't have to really do any messing around. I did clean the rubber boot here with some silicone dressing, as you can probably tell, and that slipped right back on as well. And then checked all the bulbs, the 4 different bulbs, indicator bulbs for the meters, made sure those are good, and this little project is just about done. The only thing left now, of course, is to mount the meters back on the bike. That's the final step. Here's all the waste material that I removed. The old sleeving. This is the larger sleeving, the 8mm. All the black electrical tape, and you can see it's very brittle. This sleeving is cracking and dry, and that's why I replaced it. And that's probably why the previous owner wrapped it with black electrical tape, because it was cracking. That concludes the video on re-sleeving. I did a couple different things, of course. I did the meters here. That was the focus of this particular segment, as well as previously I had done the left hand control, the switch wiring. I hope this was helpful for you. Any questions, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching. This is a bit of an addendum to the video on repairing the wiring loom on the F5. When I put everything back together, and this is part of the loom here that goes from the main wiring harness back in here, and it goes up into the headlight shell. These connections here really are for the headlight. These two, this brown and this black, are for the horn. And by the way, these two looms are coming from the instruments for the lights and indicators on the instruments, which I have already resleeved. The point of this little video is the fact that when I literally had buttoned everything back up and was testing, I couldn't get the horn to work. And these are the wires. The brown here in my right hand is the power supply. The black is the ground, and the way the horn works is when you push the button, it pulls the horn to ground, completing the circuit and activating the horn. And through testing, I determined the horn button switch was working. I had power to this brown wire, and ultimately I determined that the black wire wasn't carrying current, or wasn't carrying the ground. The problem was that this is buried inside of wrap, vinyl wrap like this. This is not electrical tape. This loom was wrapped from the factory, spiral wrapped with this non-adhesive black film, which, by the way, I had already replaced, and because the original was in poor ratty condition. Ultimately, I discovered that this black wire wasn't carrying current. So what I ended up doing is taking this all apart all the way back to here and pulling the black wire out. And I discovered, let me see if I can get this in frame, that it had a break in the wire right about there. So what I ended up doing is separating this, and literally there was a gap here of about 1/8 of an inch in the copper wire. Probably because this is right where it exited the main loom, and this was wrapped separate here, and this went on to the headlight. And probably through flexing over time, this kind of motion, the wire failed. Though the insulation, the black insulation, looked perfectly fine. And I found it by feeling along the wire. I knew I didn't have continuity through the wire, but by feeling along the wire, believe it or not, I ultimately found a soft, thin spot that I believed was the break. So I peeled back the insulation, and sure enough, that's where it was broken. What I did is I just pieced a little piece in, about that long, and repaired the break. So this is the original loom. I just had to replace the end here out of my kit because this is in very poor condition. But the wire itself is the original, along with the opposite female end, which is in actually pretty good condition. So I repaired this and used some heat shrink tubing, as you can see here, and obviously I tested the continuity, and this wire now is working. So now I will have to go back and reloom everything and put it all back together so that when it's done, it'll look something like this, and these wires will come out and go up into the horn, and the rest of this loom will go up into the headlight shell. So I thought I'd just share that was a bit of an elusive problem. It had me scratching my head for a few minutes. I have seen that before, only a couple times in all the years I've been working on these bikes. So it's not unprecedented. Again, it's usually where there's kind of this action going on, and fatigue's apparently set in. It was very clean. The brake was very clean, and again, the insulation was totally undamaged. But it's back in business, and we'll go ahead and put this back together and see if we can't get this wiring loom done once and for all.